What I'm about to share with you is my testimony of a near-death experience that completely transformed the way I see Black people, their history, and their connection to the divine. I saw and felt something so profound that it shifted my entire understanding of who we are and where we come from. My name is Jasmine Parker, and I'm a 46-year-old schoolteacher living in Georgia. It all began on August 4th, 2020. For months, I had been struggling with a variety of health issues, feeling tired, drained, and in pain that no one could pinpoint. Doctors were stumped, and I just couldn't shake the exhaustion. But on that evening, things came to a head. I remember sitting in the living room, chatting with my husband about the kids and their homework, when suddenly, everything went dark. I don't even know how to explain what happened next. One moment, I was in my home, and the next, I was somewhere else entirely, outside of my body, in a place I'd never seen before. I felt weightless, free, as though I was floating in a vast space filled with radiant light. It was like the air itself shimmered with warmth, pure and comforting. And then, standing before me, was Jesus. He was dressed in robes that were as white as light itself, and his eyes, oh, his eyes, pierced straight through me, touching the very core of my soul. In his gaze, I felt an overwhelming rush of love, comfort, and compassion, a love so deep it washed away every fear I had ever known. I knew in that instant that I was standing in the presence of someone who held all the answers, someone who could reveal truths beyond anything I had ever imagined. For a moment, Jesus didn't speak. I stood there, my heart racing, my mind swirling with 1,000 questions, but before I could utter a word, he spoke softly, his voice like a soothing balm to my anxious thoughts. "Welcome, Jasmine. You're here for a reason." The moment he said those words, I knew something monumental was about to happen. As he spoke, the truth I had been searching for, unknowingly, my entire life began to unfold. One of the first things Jesus shared with me was about the so-called curse of Ham. Growing up in the church, I had heard this story many times, how Black people were supposedly cursed because of Noah's son Ham. It was a narrative that seemed to make sense to many, and one that was often used to justify racial injustice, slavery, and discrimination. But then Jesus told me something I could hardly believe. "Jasmine, the curse of Ham has been misunderstood for centuries. The curse was never meant to fall on Black people." I was stunned, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to process his words. He explained that the curse was not placed on Ham, but on Canaan, Ham's son. It was in Genesis 9 verses 18 to 29 where the Bible recounts how Noah, after drinking too much wine, lay uncovered in his tent. When Ham saw his father's nakedness and didn't cover him, Noah cursed not Ham, but Canaan, the son of Ham. I watched as Jesus revealed how the curse on Canaan symbolized the spiritual disobedience and failure of his descendants. It was never about race or skin color, but about sin, about actions that had consequences. The curse was not meant for Black people. It was directed at Canaan and his descendants. Somehow, over the centuries, the truth had been twisted, and people used this misinterpretation to fuel their prejudices and justify their harmful actions. As I stood there, listening to Jesus explain this, I felt a wave of clarity and understanding flood my being. The curse was about spiritual failure, not skin color. It had never been a racial issue. It was a matter of disobedience. Jesus showed me how this distortion of truth had been used to perpetuate centuries of hurt, of discrimination and injustice. And I felt the weight of it, the heartbreak of how generations had been impacted by this lie. Then, as we continued walking through that sacred space, Jesus began to reveal the truth about the origins of Black people. For so long, I, like many others, had believed that Black people were somehow lesser, that they had been cursed in some way. But Jesus showed me the divine blessing behind the African heritage. "Jasmine," he said, "you have believed many false things about the African people, but I will show you the truth. The Black people, the descendants of Ham, have been misunderstood, and their true story has been distorted for centuries. It was never about a curse, but about a divine plan and blessing." With a smile that felt like warmth wrapping around me, he began to explain the significance of Ham's descendants, Cush, Mizraim, and Put. "Cush," he said, was the father of the ancient African peoples, the ones who gave birth to the great kingdom of Kush, a civilization that stood alongside Egypt as one of the greatest of antiquity. He paused for a moment, letting the gravity of those words settle in. Their history is not one of disgrace, but of honor and strength. The most striking thing was when Jesus revealed the meaning of the name Cush. He told me that in the biblical sense, Cush meant black. The term black, he explained, was never a symbol of shame. In the ancient world, it represented beauty, power, and the strength of a people. I felt as though my heart opened to something deep and powerful, as if I were witnessing the very foundation of who I was, of who we all were. Blackness was not a curse, Jesus said, but a blessed and sacred identity, though it has been misrepresented over time. As he spoke those words, I felt a sense of peace and pride, a newfound respect for my heritage, for the heritage of all Black people. I realized in that sacred moment how much the world had misunderstood, how much we had been made to feel inferior when, in truth, our identity, our history, our strength, and our beauty were always meant to be celebrated. That experience with Jesus wasn't just a revelation. It was a redemption of identity, a truth I now carry with me every day. The divine blessing that was always ours has been there all along, and it is time the world recognizes it. Through Jesus, I came to understand that the descendants of Cush were a vital part of God's divine plan for humanity. These people, he said, were blessed by God with wisdom, leadership, and favor. The African nations of Ethiopia, Cush, Nubia, and Egypt were not cursed. They were divinely inspired and chosen for a higher purpose in the ancient world. This revelation left me in awe, and I felt a deep sense of peace settle within me. For so long, I had questioned the worth and place of Black people in the grand story of humanity. But now, Jesus was showing me a truth I had never known, a truth so powerful, it felt like a missing piece of my soul had been found. One of the most profound revelations Jesus gave me was about ancient Egypt. I had always been captivated by the mysteries of Egypt, the grandeur of the pyramids, the fascinating gods and goddesses, and the remarkable achievements of the ancient Egyptians. Since I was a child, I had been drawn to their history, yet I had never understood the deeper, divine connection that Egypt had with the story of creation and the ancient peoples of God. Jasmine, Egypt was never meant to be seen only as a place of bondage, Jesus said, his voice rich with compassion. It is a cradle of civilization, a place where wisdom and knowledge were shared with the world. These words shook me to my core. Jesus explained that Mizraim, one of Ham's sons, was the father of the Egyptians. The Egyptians, he continued, were part of the same blessed lineage as Cush. They were a chosen people, entrusted with great wisdom and knowledge that was later passed down to other cultures around the world. Jesus paused, his gaze tender but firm. Egypt wasn't just a place of enslavement, he said. It was a place of divine wisdom, a source of knowledge meant to be shared. The teachings of the pharaohs, the great spiritual leaders, were part of my plan to shape the world. I felt a sudden pang of sorrow as I thought about the Israelites suffering in Egypt, the years of slavery that had left deep scars in the collective memory of my people. But Jesus gently reassured me, looking at me with compassion in his eyes. I understand the pain you've carried, seeing Egypt's role in the enslavement of the Israelites, he said. But the Egyptians, despite their fall into idolatry, were once divinely chosen to spread wisdom and light to all nations. As I stood there with Jesus, absorbing all that he was revealing to me, I felt something profound shift in my soul. I had spent my life feeling disconnected, unsure of my place in the world. But now, in this sacred moment, Jesus was showing me a new truth, one of divine heritage that stretched back to the very beginning of time. He then revealed how the misinterpretations of the Bible, the twisting of truths about race and identity, had led to centuries of pain, discrimination, and hurt. But the time for healing has come, he said, his voice full of hope. The time for truth is now. The curse of Ham was never a curse at all. It was a spiritual misunderstanding, a misunderstanding that has been used to oppress, distort, and obscure the beauty of Black people's heritage. As Jesus continued to guide me through that luminous space, the profound peace and clarity I felt were unlike anything I had ever known in my earthly life. The truth was like a balm, soothing the wounds of my past. He had already shown me the truth about the curse of Ham, how it had been misinterpreted to justify centuries of hatred and oppression. But there was still more to uncover, and Jesus, patient as ever, began to take me deeper into the mysteries of Black people's divine origin. "Jasmine, there is more to the story," he said, his voice full of promise. "I want you to see the legacy of strength, wisdom, and love that was passed down through generations of my people." At that moment, he revealed to me a grand tapestry of civilizations: Ethiopia, Nubia, Kush, Egypt, and others, all born from the descendants of Kush. These nations, he explained, were central to God's plan for humanity. They played a critical role in shaping the world long before the confusion and division that would later come. I was shown the ancient kingdom of Kush, which flourished along the Nile River. The people of Kush were not only mighty in battle, but also wise in spiritual matters. They were stewards of sacred knowledge, Jesus said. Their wisdom about creation and the divine laws of the universe was a gift from God, meant to illuminate the hearts of all nations. I saw ancient artifacts, crumbling yet regal temples, and writings that spoke of a deep and intimate connection with God, one that many people today were completely unaware of. A sense of reverence washed over me as I saw the beautiful, regal Nubian queens like Queen Amenirina's and Queen Makeda, who led their people with grace, courage, and unwavering strength. These women were not only political leaders, Jesus said with a tender smile, but spiritual leaders. They understood the divine calling upon their lives to guide their people with wisdom and love. They were beloved in my sight. The kingdom of Egypt stood as a testament to God's divine blessing, despite its later fall into idolatry. Jesus showed me that the Egyptians, at their peak, had been at the forefront of spiritual and intellectual discovery. Egypt was a cradle of wisdom, he explained. It was never meant to be a place of bondage, but a place where divine knowledge flourished. Then he spoke of Moses, the great prophet, who had been raised in Pharaoh's palace. Moses was placed in Egypt, Jesus said, to draw from the great wisdom of the Egyptians. He was called to lead my people out, but Egypt, in its early days, was meant to be a source of light, a beacon of wisdom from which many nations would be blessed. Jesus gently corrected my understanding of Egypt's idolatry, explaining that what the world called idolatry was once part of their spiritual path. They sought to understand the divine, but they got lost along the way. Still, the foundation of their wisdom was rooted in truth. As I stood there, absorbing the rich tapestry of history and divine purpose Jesus was unfolding before me, I was overcome with emotion. I saw the African diaspora, not as a random occurrence, but as part of God's larger plan. The forced movement of millions of African people through slavery had been a tragic chapter in human history, but even in that pain, the African people had carried with them a divine spark, a deep sense of hope, faith, and strength that could never be extinguished. Jesus showed me that slavery, though one of the darkest chapters in human history, was not something God ordained. It was the result of human sin and greed. But even in the face of suffering, the African people had carried with them an enduring faith, a resilience, and a legacy of divine strength. And that, I now knew, was their true heritage. This divine strength had endured through centuries of suffering, and it was this strength that made the Black community so resilient. I could feel it deep in my bones, this undeniable force that had been passed down through generations, through hardship, loss, and unyielding oppression. It was the same strength that had survived the unimaginable and still stood strong, unwavering in the face of adversity. Jasmine, the African people are not just survivors. They are my warriors, my children, carrying a divine legacy that has been passed down for millennia. Jesus spoke with such conviction that I felt those words stir something profound within me. It wasn't just a truth I heard, it was something I felt with every fiber of my being. It was like he was speaking directly to my soul, reminding me of the sacred power I carried within. As I pondered his words, I saw visions, vivid and powerful, of Black spiritual leaders who had risen up throughout history. I saw the abolitionists who fought against the evils of slavery, the civil rights leaders who had given their lives for justice. Like Martin Luther King Jr., they were not just fighting for freedom. They were fighting for justice, for the divine will to be done on earth. Their struggle was a divine one, a battle that had been etched into the very fabric of creation. Jesus showed me how God had always been with the African people, even in their darkest hours, raising up prophets, leaders, and activists to speak for his truth, to guide his people toward a brighter future. Then, Jesus led me to understand something I had often wondered about: African spirituality. For years, I had been curious about the spiritual practices of my ancestors, the rituals, the reverence for ancestors, the sacred connection to the earth and nature. What did it all mean? Was it aligned with God? Jesus explained to me with such tenderness that these practices, when kept pure, were not opposed to God but were, in fact, an expression of the deep spiritual connection the African people had with the divine. Jasmine, your ancestors knew that they were connected to the earth, to the stars, to all creation, he said, his voice rich with love and understanding. They understood that the divine is in all things, and that all things can be used to honor God. Jesus showed me how honoring ancestors in many African cultures was not about worshiping the dead, as I had once thought, but about acknowledging the wisdom, strength, and sacrifices of those who had come before. Honoring your ancestors is not about idolizing them, he explained, but recognizing their place in the divine story. It is about staying connected to the wisdom and love that flows through generations. I saw images of ancient African rituals, the people dancing, singing, and communing with God through the elements: fire, water, air, and earth. These were not just performances. They were expressions of divine connection. These rituals were rooted in the understanding that God's presence wasn't confined to a building or a book. It pervaded all of creation. I am present in all things, Jesus said softly. My presence flows through the earth, the wind, the water, and the fire. The rituals you see were expressions of the deep connection between the Creator and His creation. In that moment, everything clicked. Spirituality was not confined to one culture or one religion. It was a universal experience. It was an encounter with the divine that could manifest in many different ways, but always from the same source, always rooted in God's eternal love. As my journey with Jesus continued, he began to explain to me the struggles and trials that African people, and Black Americans in particular, had endured throughout history. I saw how the struggle for freedom, equality, and justice was not just a matter of human effort but was deeply tied to a divine purpose, one that had been prophesied and predestined by God. Jasmine, Jesus said, his voice filled with authority and compassion, the struggle of the Black community is not just a fight for human rights. It is a spiritual battle. It is a battle for the restoration of divine truth and justice on earth. Their fight is a fight for the dignity, the honor, and the rightful place that has always been theirs in my kingdom. They are my beloved, and I have heard their cries. This revelation washed over me like a wave. It was powerful and all-encompassing. It meant that the pain, the suffering, and the oppression that Black people had faced were not in vain. They were part of a larger, cosmic struggle for truth and justice. The fight for equality was not just a political or social movement. It was a spiritual calling. God had seen the injustices, and he was using this community to bring about change in the world. I saw how the strength of the Black community, from the resilience of African slaves to the civil rights movements, was not just human strength. It was a manifestation of God's divine purpose. These struggles, though painful, were part of God's plan to restore truth, love, and unity to the earth. And then, I began to understand the role of African people in the divine plan of salvation. Jesus explained that the struggles faced by Black people were a testimony to the world, an enduring testimony of how the divine spark within them had never been extinguished, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. Jasmine, the return of my people, my children, will come in a time of great awakening. The truth about their identity and purpose will be revealed to the world, and with it will come a time of restoration and unity, Jesus said, his voice filled with hope and anticipation. I was given a vision of the return of Jesus, where he would bring justice, peace, and reconciliation to all people, especially to the Black community. The truth about their divine origin would no longer be hidden. The world would finally see the blessing that had been misunderstood for so long. It would be a moment of great revelation and healing. As I began to return to my earthly body, I felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. The divine heritage of Black people was not something to be ashamed of or hidden. It was a sacred gift, one that had been passed down through generations, and one that would continue to shine as a beacon of hope, strength, and divine purpose. When I finally woke up in the hospital, I was changed. The doctors told me that I had been clinically dead for over 12 minutes, but I knew that what I had experienced could never be explained by science alone. I had seen the divine plan unfold before me. I had been shown the love and mercy of Jesus, who had revealed to me the true and sacred role of Black people in the story of God's kingdom. If you're watching this, I want you to know that what I experienced was not just for me. It was for all of us. The truth revealed to me is this: Black people are not cursed. They are divinely chosen, with a rich legacy of strength, wisdom, and purpose. Our struggles are part of a larger spiritual battle, but in the end, healing and restoration will come. If you're Black, know that you are part of something greater. You are loved, chosen, and powerful. And if you're from another background, the message of unity and healing is for you too. Together, we can heal the world through understanding and love. Let's remember the words in Isaiah, chapter 61, verses 7-9. Instead of your shame, you will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance. And so you will inherit a double portion in your land, and everlasting joy will be yours. For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and wrongdoing. In my faithfulness, I will reward my people and make an everlasting covenant with them. Their descendants will be known among the nations, and their offspring among the peoples. All who see them will acknowledge that they are a people the Lord has blessed. If my story resonated with you, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to NDE Chronicles for more inspiring near-death experiences. It helps reach those who need to hear it. Thanks for watching.